the defenders of nature, and shapeshifters that stalk the lands as dreaded were-badgers ready to eat your face. In this video, I'll be going over another of the 12 classes ahead of the launch of Baldur's Gate 3 come August 3rd. Today we'll be focusing on the Druid. You can find the other classes linked in the playlist at the end of this video. I'll be pulling information from the 5th edition Player's Handbook, as well as a ton of information from the brand new Baldur's Gate 3 official wiki. This is a community-run project that is ad-free, so I'm going to throw a link down to it in the description in the pinned comment. These guys have poured a ton of information in a lot of really good, comprehensive, easy-to-read formats, so you can go ahead and check those out if you want to get more details on what I'm talking about. There are some other wikis out there that are just not really as comprehensive as this one, so please go ahead and check those links out. They're really going to give you a lot of really cool information. But there won't be a ton of visuals of what I'm going through. I'm going to be using the early access character select screen because I do not want to spoil anything from the game for myself or for you. And how we'll do this video is by talking about the base kit without any subclasses, then go into the 3 subclasses that we know are coming at launch. It's worth noting that most subclass abilities go up to level 20 in D&D, but the cap for Baldur's Gate 3 is level 12. So we'll talk about the high-end capabilities because we still aren't sure what's kind of coming into the game, what they might modify. But just want to be a little bit transparent with that up front. Keep in mind that you can fully respec both your character and companions for the exception of their race, so I encourage you to try out every class you're curious about when the game launches, and please, as always, play how you want and not how the internet tells you. Lastly, I am no expert, no D&D expert at all, not even slightly, so I apologize if I missed the mark on any of these descriptions. If you need any help with any of the terms, I made a quick terms guide for you in the upper right corner that goes over stuff like advantage, ability checks, and more. You can quickly navigate to any part of the video that interests you the most using the chapters above the timeline in the description. Also, don't forget to swing on by my Twitch where I'll be streaming Baldur's Gate 3 on launch, linked in the description and pinned comment. But let's get started here on my Druid class and subclass detailed breakdown for Baldur's Gate 3. So to open us up with the Druid, we have a class that is pretty crazy. You have a lot of things going for you, and you have 3 subclasses that, again, jump into a lot of different directions. And one thing that's really important to kind of know with D&D is that you can really be anything within a class, right? You can be a tankier person, you can be a DPS person, you can be a healer person. And those 3, the trinity doesn't really exist in tabletop D&D the way that it really does in, say, World of Warcraft. So don't think of yourself jumping into a druid as someone who's going to be all the different facets of something in a very set way. You can really play this in a lot of different ways and a way to approach it, and even multi-class into something entirely different. It's something I just wanted to bring up about Druid real quick up front, because like the fighter, which we talked about, Druid has a lot of really wild multi-class potential. That's going to come when we talk about wild shape in just a second here. So the Druid is a wisdom class, meaning that you'll be using wisdom primarily for your ability checks to find out how many spells you can prepare, which we'll talk about in a second, your spell casting capabilities, all sorts of fun things when it all comes to wisdom. And that is going to be your big primary thing. But of course, Constitution is going to be important because there are quite a few spells that are concentrated in that you need to maintain concentration to keep them up. And remember what we've talked about before, you would do a constitution check for whether or not you fail or pass a constitution roll. So anytime an enemy hits you when you have a concentration ability up, oh, there you go, here's one right here, you would do a constitution check to see for that concentration check. It's just think that con goes to con. It's a really weird way to look at it. And also dexterity is important because that is going to be linked to your armor class and your initiative. But outside of those things, we have quite a few class features right here, right? Wisdom and intelligence saving throw proficiencies, which we've talked about before, that you add your proficiency bonus to your intelligence saving throws. Remember, your proficiency bonus starts at 2, but it will scale up as you level through the game. But you'd add that to anytime you have to do any of those rolls. We're going to have light and medium armor proficiency, as well as shield, club, dagger, javelin, mace, quarterstaff, scimitar, sickle, and spear proficiency. And then we have spells. So you can see here that we have 4 prepared spells, but then we have all this list of spells down here. So the way that it works with a druid, and not every class is like this, like we've talked about with the sorcerer, right, or we've talked about with the warlock, you have the ability to prepare these spells that you kind of know. Well, you know them. You don't kind of know them. You know them. So all these spells right here, you need to prepare. And the number of spells that you can prepare is based off of like a wisdom score and your level, I believe, and I can't remember what that actual equation is. When you do so, choose a number of druid spells equal to your wisdom modifier plus your druid level. So our druid level is level 1. Our wisdom modifier's number is +3. So if I go ahead and like try to tank this down, there we go. We'll go back here and you can see that we can only prepare 1 spell, right? Because our druid level is 1 and our wisdom score is 0+ ability, 0+ modifier there. Just to kind of show that off. So prepared spells, I'm going to press customize and I can go ahead and prepare these. Basically, you prepare 4 of the 13 known spells, and those spell numbers increase over time as you get access to more and you get more and more spell slots available. You increase your wisdom, you can know more, you can prepare more, you level up, you can prepare more, all sorts of ways to increase the prepared spells portion. So basically think of it as, I know 13 spells, but I can only cast 4 of them at a time. And if I want to swap out these 4 spells, I would simply go like this, and then we'll prepare Fog Cloud instead. And then I need to do a long rest. Once I've done that long rest, that spell that I've now swapped out becomes part of my spells that I can cast. This enables me to have a little bit of flexibility. And you'll see this when we talk about the cleric, when we talk about the wizard, or just this ability to kind of slot in different spells for the occasions that we might need. Maybe they're utility, maybe they're healing, maybe they're damage, maybe they're summoning, whatever it is that you want to kind of add some flair into your kind of current druid. Now remember, cantrips and spells are different. Cantrips are considered level 0 spells, so they do not take up a spell slot. So effectively, you could cast a cantrip every single turn if you so wish. Here's a fun side note about me and how dumb I am. When I was growing up playing Baldur's Gate, I thought this was Shalaga. So yeah, it's Shillelagh. I'm still not that dumb, but I'm pretty dumb. So outside of that, though, our skills that we get, we're looking at Arcana, Animal Handling, Medicine, Nature, Perception, and Survival. Let me just make sure that we also have Religion and Insight too are part of our skills. Remember, skills proficiency, whenever we select one of these, we're adding that proficiency bonus to the roll. So take Animal Handling, for example. It's a Wisdom skill. We have a +3 Wisdom modifier. We use proficiency in it. We get that +2 up to 5 now. So those are our skills that we have access to. Now, outside of that, what makes this a very crazy class? Well, you can speak Druidic, that's kind of cool, right? You have spellcasting capability, cantrips, you get Wild Shape, though. And really everything else outside of that, I'm going to talk about Wild Shape in a sec, is not important. Timeless Body and Beast spells and Arch Druid, they happen at level 18 and 20, so you'll never actually encounter them in Baldur's Gate 3. Outside of it, though, is your Druid Circle, which is the subclass you would select at level 2. And I'm unsure if you select it at level 2 or if you start the game with it, because the way that I've seen the character creator work now is you choose your subclass during that character creation. It might take until level 2 for it to actually trigger, but it seems like you create it then at the very least. So, Wild Shape. And the most important thing about the Druid, arguably, Wild Shape works like this, and here there's different rules for Wild Shape in the actual. This is not a codex. This is not Warhammer 40,000. In the actual army book, so I'm gonna. Oh gosh, in the player handbook, I'm gonna read the actual game's Wild Shape. Magically assume the shape of a beast. While in animal shape, you can't talk or cast spells. You take on the game statistics of your beast form, excluding your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma scores. When your beast form drops to 0 points. You then will take on the health that you will revert back to your normal form with the number of hit points you had before transforming. If your hit points dropped below 0 in beast form, that damage is applied after you revert. Spells that require concentration are not broken by turning into an animal. Your equipment merges into your animal form and won't have any effect until you revert. That is very cool, right? Very strong, and we're going to go through what your wild shape form options are in a sec, because they differ depending on your subclass. But wild shape in tabletop enabled you to still use any kind of additional class capabilities, like Divine Smite, for example. That is not a druid ability, right? Or Sneak Attack, which is a rogue capability, right? So, or Rage from Barbarian, which is really cool. So those things were in tabletop. And we don't know necessarily if they're part of Baldur's Gate 3 just yet. I haven't been able to find full confirmation. If you know, please by all means let me know in the comment section below. But we know you can't cast spells, obviously, and you can't talk. But I'm unsure if you cannot use your class skills. If you can use your class skill, it makes Druid still a very strong class. And if you multi-class, let's say I take Druid, and then I multi-class into a Barbarian, now I can wild shape into a bear if I choose the Circle of the Moon, and then become enraged as a portion of my Barbarian Rage capability, and I just become disgustingly strong. So let me show you what the wild shape forms are like for Druid. And this is the BG3 wiki. This is probably just the easiest way to show it. But every single shape will have a special capability. Like take the wild shape Badger, for example. They get Burrow. Burrow is a wild shape Badger action. Badgers use this ability to burrow themselves underground and traverse through terrain, like locked doors and stuff like that. So this is a really cool thing that you can do as a Badger. And there are certain wild shapes that are relegated to subclasses, like the Circle of the Moon Druid can be the bear. So if you are not a Circle of the Moon Druid, so if you choose Circle of Spores or Circle of the Land, you unfortunately will not be able to wild shape into a bear. But cat is a cat, and badger are default, as well as spider and wolf. And just to kind of show you, I guess we don't really have all these. Yeah, here's the Inciting Howl is a wild shape wolf action. Wolves use this ability to increase their allies' movement speed. So you get some really cool fun abilities with each one of these individual wild shape capabilities. Like, for example, bears can basically taunt people, taunt them to attack them. Cats over here have Meow, wild shape cat, and find familiar cat action. Cats use this ability to distract enemies, which is lovely. I believe it gives them disadvantage. Spiders here have web spider. Spiders use the ability to shoot out webbing that can entangle creatures, which is really sick. Then Dire Raven is also a Circle of the Moon only Druid form. This is going to give you rend vision here. Dire Ravens and Ravens use this ability to make a melee attack that deals piercing damage to enemies and possibly blinds them, which is cool. And then the Deep Wrath is available to Circle of the Land and Circle of the Moon Druids, from what I understand. The Circle of the Spores has not confirmed which forms it will get, but it gets Charge and Gore here, which are pretty cool. There's also like Beak Attack and stuff like that that all these other things get, but there's always like some sort of kind of like big buff or big like utility that each wild shape has in Baldur's Gate 3. Now the only wild shape that's not shown here in this situation is the wild shape for Owlbear, which again, Moon and Land will get access to at level 6. But these are the ones in the game that we know of so far that are 100% confirmed. And there might be more at launch, but these are definitely the ones. In tabletop, it was way different, but I just wanted to show you what this looked like in a Baldur's Gate 3 term. And the first subclass I want to talk about is the Circle of the Land. Now, this is a subclass that is geared far more towards casting. That is kind of the name to claim to fame here, because you're going to select a land and then get specific spells from that land and what have you, kind of a land affinity that you'll get. And what's nice here is too that you get a really cool ability. Their kind of claim to fame is natural recovery. Basically what this does is it gives you the ability to recover spell slots without having to rest. So when it starts off, I think it's like just strength 1, and then the combined number and level of spell slots that natural recovery action can restore is based off of that strength number. And then you also have natural recovery charges. So as you level up, you'll be able to recover more spells, higher spell levels, and you'll have more charges to be able to do this multiple times before having to long rest. It basically allows you to get more spells cast in a single rest without having to jump into, well, a long rest. And we talked about the wild shape forms, right? Cat, badger, wolf, and spider are your ones that you'll get as access to land with Owlbear at level 6. But once you hit level 3, you will choose your circle more, your association, your land association, as it were. And this allows you also, you get a Deep Wrath, wild shape Deep Wrath at level 4 as well. Forgot about that one. But These will give you access to different spells. So for example, Arctic will give you Hold Person and Spike Growth. Desert will give you Blur and Silence. Forest will give you Bark Skin and Hold Person. And this is kind of the big thing that makes this a part of you as a caster druid, because these spells do not count as prepared. They are always prepared. They do not count against the number that you can prepare. So, for example, we have 4 prepared spells. If I choose Forest, well, now I will always have Barkskin and Hold Person as kind of like a +2 to this number, right? I'll always have those spells to take advantage of, plus the 4 I've selected of my known spells. This is pretty spicy. And then this becomes expanded here. We get even more spells, like Arctic will get Sleet, Storm, and Haste at level 5, or Protection from Energy and Hypnotic Pattern. Call Lightning, Plant Growth for Forest, or Grassland gets Daylight and Haste. Mountain gets Call Lightning and Fly. So these things will expand and give us even more capabilities as a land-associated druid, which is very, very, very fun. We get Landstride at level 6 here, which allows you to move through non-magical difficult terrain, which costs you no extra movement. So I could see that actually coming into the game because of how movement works in Baldur's Gate 3. I'm just not quite sure how it exactly works. Maybe you're able to traverse certain things because, you know, if I say, hey, Arctic, and I never go to an Arctic portion of the game, that's not going to really benefit me. So I'm wondering how they're going to put Landstride into the game. Also, we get Nature's Ward. So when you reach the 10th level, you can't be charmed or frightened by elementals or fray, and you are immune to poison and diseases. So you've got all those things as your advantage with the Circle of the Land. So the Circle of the Land, again, is very geared towards casting. And if that's the type of druid you want to be, then Circle of the Land is absolutely going to be for you. Circle of the Moon, as I mentioned, is all about taking advantage of that wild shape form that you get access to. We get exclusive access to special forms like Wild Shape Bear, which we talked about is definitely more tanky, can actually taunt things, and we get Wild Shape Dire Raven. And we will also get access to Deep Wrath at 4, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing Deep Wrath, but also get access to Owlbear at level 6. Outside of that, though, we have a different type of Wild Shape. So Wild Shape takes a action to cast. Combat Wild Shape is what you get as the Circle of the Moon, and that is a bonus action. Remember, every turn you can use an action and a bonus action. Actions are typically things like casting spells, attacking with a weapon, whereas bonus actions are things like dashing or jumping or leaping onto things, whatever it is. Bonus actions are definitely kind of giving you a little bit more utility, versus actions are kind of a direct impact into the world. And that's a real weird way to kind of put it, but it's probably the easiest way I can think of. So being able to cast or do anything as an action and then shapeshifting, or shapeshifting and then moving or attacking, is really awesome. Because remember, you can't cast in shapeshifted form, but you can maintain any concentrated spell you have when you jump into your beast form. So, you know, guidance. Bestow guidance upon an ally. They gain 1d4 bonus to ability checks. You can cast this and then go into your combat wild shape in the same turn. Just to, again, kind of create a kind of scenario on how some of this would work. Fog Cloud, for example, this is a concentration ability. Cast it and then go into your combat wild shape. Now, outside of that, you also get Lunar Mend, which is an ability that you can use when you are in wild shape, which allows you to heal yourself, keeping you in that wild shape for longer. Remember, if you go into wild shape, you take on the hit points of the thing that you wild shape into. Let's just say it's a bear, which I think had like 30 or 45 hit points. And once you lose those hit points, you jump out of the wild shape unless you forcibly or voluntarily end the wild shape. So using Lunar Mend kind of extends the time in which you are in that wild shape, which is absolutely crucial. Now, in the 5th edition book, we also have Primal Strike, which happens at level 6. So your attacks in beast form count as magical for the purpose of overcoming resistance and immunity to non-magical attacks and damage. It gives you a little bit more viability in the later portions of the game. And then Elemental Wild Shape, which I don't know if it's going to be in Baldur's Gate 3, but I hope to God it is, where you get to use 2 uses of your wild shape at the same time to transform into an air, earth, fire, or water elemental, which is pretty sick. So if you want to be a close combat druid that really relies on using wild shape, well, then definitely Circle of the Moon is going to be for you. But also think of how you can apply this to other classes. mainly melee classes that you can just kind of pull a lot of the benefits from. Like we've talked about it before, but sneak attack, rage, divine strike, smite, whatever it is, trying to pull those benefits into the druid class by using this as your base to get that circle of the moon, activate that combat wild shape, and just go to town with stuff. So our last subclass is the Druid of Spores, a circle of spores, which kind of essentially turns you into like a necromancer druid, and that's probably the easiest way to explain it. You get special spells that you'll get access to. Also, you have these kind of symbiotic fungi that are always kind of floating around you. It's pretty wild. So you learn Chill Touch, which is a pretty cool spell. And as you go through more levels, you'll get access to Blindness, Deafness, Gentle Repose, Animate Dead, Gaseous Form, Blight, Confusion, Cloud Kill, Contagion, all throughout more levels of this subclass. But you get, the big one is Halo of Spores. And this one is pretty wild. So these spores float around you, and you can use whenever a creature you can see moves into a space within 10 feet of you or starts in its turn there, you can use your reaction. Remember, a reaction is done when another creature takes something or does something. You can use this as a result. Use your reaction to deal 1d4 necrotic damage to that creature unless it succeeds on a Constitution saving throw against your spell save DC or difficulty class. The necrotic damage increases to 1d6 at the 6th level, 1d8 at the 10th level, and 1d10 at the 14th level, which we probably wouldn't take access to because we only can get to level 12. And then Symbiotic Entity is kind of a different way that we can approach Wild Shape for this druid. So this druid will get access to your typical wild shape forms, you know, like your wolf, your badger, your cat, your spider. But Symbiotic Entity is basically allows you to use a wild shape activation to trigger the symbiotic entity. So essentially what happens here is you can expand a use of your wild shape feature to awaken those spores rather than transforming into a beast form, and you gain 4 temp hit points for each level you have in this class. While this feature is active, you gain the following benefits. When you deal your Halo of Spores damage roll, that's the one where someone is within 10 feet of you, roll the damage die a second time and add it to the total. So if someone activates within 10 feet of me, I'm level 1, or level 2, because that's what it takes to get this thing to turn on. Then I do 2d4 rather than 1d4. Also, your melee weapon attacks deal an extra 1d6 necrotic damage to any target they hit. This benefit lasts for 10 minutes until you lose all temp hit points or until you use your wild shape again. Those are the big kind of things you can do. Remember how I said though this is kind of like a necromancer? You also get fungal infestation, which is disgusting. So you can infest and animate a corpse if it is next to you. If it's a beast or humanoid, that is kind of the restriction. It has to be small or medium. But you can use your reaction to animate it, which is lovely, right? You're not using an action or a bonus action. You're like, oh, someone died and wasn't my turn. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and animate it. So when that happens, it comes back with 1 hit point. And it uses essentially the zombie stats from the monster manual. I'm not sure what they're going to do here for Baldur's Gate 3, but it remains around for about an hour. And again, I don't know how they're going to do that in Baldur's Gate 3. But this zombie takes a turn as its own creature after you. And that's nice because you're not using actions or bonus actions to command it. It just has its own turn, which is pretty sick. And you can use this a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, and you regain all expended uses of it when you finish a long rest. So I can use this ability 2 times if I had this wisdom score. I think if I didn't do this. Oh, well, I guess not. Never mind. But I was going to say if this was a +3, then I'd be able to use it 3 times. At level 10 though, you get Spreading Spores. So basically you can send spores, seed an area with deadly spores. As a bonus action, while your symbiotic entity feature is active, so while your zombies are moving around, you can hurl spores up to 30 feet away. I'm sorry, not zombies moving around. When you've used your wild shape to have those spores floating around. So you can hurl your spores 30 feet away, and where they swirl in a 10-foot cube for 1 minute. The spores disappear early if you use this feature again, if you dismiss them as a bonus action, or if your symbiotic entity feature is no longer active. So then now that you've cast this cube out, whenever a creature moves into the cube or starts its turn there, that creature takes your Halo of Spores damage. That Halo of Spores damage is that 1d4, that 1d6, that 1d8 we talked about before, right? But now it's got that symbiotic entity, so it gets more damage. So unless the creature succeeds on a Constitution saving throw against your spell damage DC, a creature can take this damage no more than once per turn. And while the cube of Spores persists, you can't use your Halo of Spores reaction. So, this is really cool because you're taking that Halo of Spores that was around you and you're casting it out. That's no longer around you and you can't use that reaction damage. And every time someone comes into that, they're going to take that 1d8, that 2d8, depending on whatever situations are going on, right? You need symbiotic entity active so it gets that additional damage. So this is all about animating corpses and getting a lot of damage out. And it's a pretty complex class, but I think it's one that a lot of people are going to like if they enjoyed the base Druid kit and they want to get a lot more out of it. So at that, it brings our video here to a close. We've covered all 3 of the subclasses here for the Druid, and I think that the Druid is, again, it's in 5th edition, it's considered a very broken class because of Wild Shape and what you can do with Wild Shape as it expands to other classes. Are you going to play a pure Druid? Are you going to simply stick with a single subclass, or are you going to try to mix this into other classes, maybe playing a Druid and a Ranger and going wild with stuff with Wild Shape or land? Let me know in the comment section below because I'd love to see what you guys are going to do with Druid, or if you're even going to play one. I personally, I remember buying the 2nd or 3rd edition D&D Druid handbook because I played a Druid in EverQuest and I had like a real boner for Druid. So it is one of my favorite classes. So I'm very excited to see how this plays itself out in Baldur's Gate 3, especially the Circle of Spores Druid and what that all kind of entails when it makes that transition from tabletop into 5th edition, or into Baldur's Gate 3. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.